Resident Evil has never been short on horrible ways to die. But honestly, the deaths are usually the easy part. The really disturbing stories belong to the people who survive long enough for a virus, a corporation, or their own family to decide that they are useful. So today, we are going through the series' most disturbing backstories. Let's begin with the man people remember for roundhouse kicks, because Leon Kennedy's career is much darker when you remember that it was never really his choice. Leon S. Kennedy Leon arrives in Raccoon City in September of 1998, expecting his first day as a police officer. That sentence already feels cruel when you know what is waiting for him. The city is collapsing. Most of the police are dead. The station is full of infected civilians and Umbrella experiments, and Leon has essentially no time to become a normal cop before his job description changes to preventing the end of the world. He meets Claire Redfield, finds a 12-year-old girl named Sherry Birkin, and survives long enough to watch almost everyone around him disappear. His commanding officers are dead. The woman he starts trusting, Ada Wong, has been lying about her mission. Sherry's father becomes a mutating creature that repeatedly hunts his own daughter, and after Leon, Claire, and Sherry finally escape, the United States government destroys Raccoon City to contain the outbreak and bury the evidence. That would be enough trauma for one lifetime. Leon does not get one lifetime. The ending materials in the original Resident Evil 3 and the same event retold in the Dark Side Chronicles make his recruitment very clear. Government agents take Leon and Sherry into custody. They know Sherry carries the G-Virus antibody. Leon tells them to leave her alone because she is innocent. Their answer is basically, she knows too much. You have useful experience. And if you want this to end peacefully, you have one choice. That is not a job offer. That is blackmail with a benefits package. Leon agrees to serve the government, at least in part to protect Sherry. By Resident Evil 4, he is an elite agent sent alone into rural Spain to recover the president's daughter. People love to joke that the government apparently looked at an entire military and decided one emotionally damaged 27-year-old with excellent hair would be cheaper. But the darker point is that Leon has been turned into a state asset for the same reason Umbrella turns people into biological assets. He survived something rare, so an institution claimed the value of that survival. And it keeps happening. Operation Javier brings him face to face with another infected teenage girl, Manuela. Spain forces him to relive the helplessness of trying to save Sherry, this time with Ashley. In Tall Oaks, he has to shoot President Benford after the man who recruited him becomes infected. Then Requiem reveals that even surviving Raccoon City may have left a delayed biological cost inside him. Leon is charming because he has learned to perform calmness. The jokes, the one-liners, the impossible confidence, they are not proof that none of this affects him. They are how he keeps moving through it. His most disturbing backstory is that the rookie who wanted to help people actually did help them, and that act gave the government leverage over the rest of his life. Leon at least kept his own mind, though. The next person volunteered to save her partner, woke up as a laboratory resource, and was forced to watch her own body betray everything she believed in. Jill Valentine. Jill Valentine's life is basically the series testing how many separate violations of one person's body can be called a coincidence. First, she survives the Spencer Mansion in 1998. She discovers that her captain, Albert Wesker, has manipulated the STARS team into becoming live combat data for Umbrella's creatures. She escapes, tries to expose the company, and is largely ignored because Umbrella owns enough of Raccoon City to make the truth sound like a conspiracy. Then Umbrella sends Nemesis to erase the surviving STARS members. Think about the psychological cruelty of that. Jill is not caught in the path of a random monster. The monster has been deployed specifically because she knows what happened. It can say the word STARS because its entire purpose is to find people like her and remove the evidence. Nemesis infects Jill with the T-virus. Carlos gets her a vaccine. She survives again, and the virus appears to be gone. It is not. Years later, Jill and Chris Redfield locate Umbrella founder Oswell Spencer. Wesker gets there first. He is physically overwhelming Chris, so Jill tackles him through a window and both of them fall from a cliff. The BSA searches for her, finds no body, and eventually declares her dead. But Wesker survives. So does Jill. He treats her injuries, places her in cryogenic sleep, and plans to use her as a test subject for Ouroboros. While monitoring her, his researchers discover that the T-virus from Raccoon City was not fully erased. It had remained dormant. During cryogenic sleep, it reactivated, then disappeared, leaving Jill with powerful antibodies. So the infection that nearly killed her becomes the reason Wesker keeps her alive. Her body is used to help reduce the toxicity of Ouroboros, the exact kind of bioweapon she devoted her life to stopping. When she is no longer useful for that research, Wesker finds another purpose for her. A chemical called P30 can enhance physical performance, while making a subject highly susceptible to control, but it wears off quickly. The solution is a device attached to Jill's chest that continuously administers it. For the next stage of her life, Jill is conscious enough to suffer, but chemically denied control. Wesker hides her face behind a mask, and sends her against Chris and Sheva. The person who sacrificed herself to save Chris is turned into the weapon, trying to kill him. And the series does not pretend that removing the device fixes everything. Capcom's own retrospective notes that Jill later struggles with the fact that she aimed a gun at her allies, even though it happened against her will. She enters rehabilitation, her body survives, her freedom returns, but the guilt remains irrationally attached to her, because trauma is not interested in legal responsibility. That is what makes Jill's history worse than a simple capture story. Wesker does not just imprison her, he takes her courage, her antibodies, her skills, and even her loyalty, then repackages all of them as tools for his own plan. Jill's body was exploited because she survived infection. Luis Serra's story begins one step earlier. He is one of the people who helped build the nightmare, realized what he had done, and returned home just in time to watch it consume everybody he knew. Luis Serra and the villagers of Valdelobos. The original Resident Evil 4 gives Luis Serra the energy of a charming stranger who definitely has 3 passports and owes money in countries that no longer exist. The remake makes him much sadder. Luis grew up in Valdelobos, the isolated rural region where Leon later searches for Ashley Graham. Files in the village describe a bright boy raised by his grandfather after his mother died during childbirth. He loved stories about Don Quixote and was intelligent enough that the village chief believed he might have become a scholar if he were not trapped there. Then his grandfather became sick. The old man's journal describes a hunting injury that swells and discolors. He hears voices and feels his body moving on its own. The villagers recognize a madness spreading through him, surround the cabin, and burn it down while young Luis watches. The next day, Luis is gone. He does become a scholar. According to the investigative report found in the remake, Luis earns a doctorate and becomes a rising umbrella researcher before abruptly resigning. Additional material links him to Umbrella's European Laboratory 6, the facility associated with the Nemesis project. The safest factual version is not that Luis personally built Nemesis with a screwdriver and a dream. It is that he worked inside the research structure responsible for that project. He knew what Umbrella science looked like from the inside, and somehow, after escaping that company, he returns to Valdelobos and works for Osmond Sadler. This is where Luis becomes fascinating. He has enough intelligence to recognize monsters, but not enough self-respect to believe he can do something better. In his own words and behavior, he treats himself like a man already stained by what he helped create. So when Sadler's cult offers more research, Luis repeats the pattern. He helps study Las Plagas, a parasite capable of turning a human being into an obedient host. The superior strain can preserve intelligence while destroying freedom, which is the sort of sentence Resident Evil scientists write, and somehow do not immediately follow with, "Actually, maybe I should become an accountant." While Luis works, his home is being erased. The remake's ending photographs are one of the bleakest details in the series. They begin with ordinary village life. Families, work, celebrations, people smiling for a camera. Then the cult arrives. Excavation begins. Parasites are unearthed. The images grow harsher, the faces less human, until the villagers we have spent the game fighting are no longer presented as an enemy population. They are evidence of a community being converted. That changes every encounter. The farmer charging Leon with an axe did not wake up and choose cult violence. The parasite has subordinated him to Sadler. The women, miners, and laborers were people with routines and relatives before they became ganados. Luis eventually turns against Sadler. He steals the amber, develops suppressants, helps Leon and Ashley, and tries to make sure the parasite does not leave the island. In the remake, he calls it a chance to change course. That is why his death works. Luis does not get to erase his responsibility, and the story does not magically declare him clean. He simply decides that guilt is not an excuse to keep helping the wrong people. He dies trying to undo a fraction of the damage. The villagers do not even receive that choice. And if that sounds cruel, the next teenager loses his home because of his father's decision, gets imprisoned by Umbrella, has to kill that same father, and is then infected by the woman who has been torturing his family. Steve Burnside is 17 years old during Code Veronica. That matters, because the game gives him the voice, confidence, and decision-making ability of a teenager. And people sometimes judge him like he is a 35-year-old soldier who should really have this all figured out. He does not. Steve's father worked for Umbrella. He tried to steal company information and sell it to the highest bidder. Umbrella discovered the plan, killed Steve's mother, and sent Steve and his father to the prison on Rockford Island. Steve had no role in the theft. He was not an employee. He was not a conspirator. He was a child Umbrella imprisoned because punishing the whole family was efficient. By the time Claire Redfield meets him, Steve covers fear with arrogance. He insists he does not need anyone. He distrusts family and tries to act older than he is. That behavior can be annoying, but it makes painful sense when his last experience of trusting a parent ended with his mother dead and his own life reduced to a prison number. Then the outbreak happens. Steve and Claire are trying to escape when a zombie approaches. Steve freezes. Claire cannot understand why he will not shoot until the zombie turns toward her, and Steve empties both guns into it while screaming one word: "Father." Afterward, he explains what his father did. He calls him reckless and stupid. He is furious. And then he collapses beside the body anyway, because knowing your parent destroyed your family does not stop them from being your parent. Steve finally begins to trust Claire. He helps her escape Rockfort, follows her to the Antarctic facility, and seems for a few minutes like he might actually survive. Then Alexia Ashford captures him and administers the T. Veronica virus. The mutation is immediate and enormous. Steve becomes a towering creature carrying an axe. He pursues Claire and nearly kills her. But when Alexia's tendrils seize Claire, some part of Steve regains control. Capcom's official creature description is explicit that his mind was not completely overwhelmed. He turns on the tendril, saves Claire, changes back enough to speak, and dies after telling her he loves her. Then Wesker appears and says he has taken Steve's body because the T. Veronica virus can be recovered from it. This is another detail that often gets mangled. Wesker does not say he sold Steve's body to a drug lord. Later, a T. Veronica sample reaches Javier Hidalgo, but the canon point is that Steve's infected body becomes a source Wesker can exploit. Even after death, Steve is still valuable biological property. His father treats Umbrella secrets as something to sell. Umbrella treats the family as disposable. Alexia treats Steve as a test subject. Wesker treats his remains as a sample container. The only person who treats him like a human being is Claire, and they have barely any time together. Steve's story is not disturbing because a teenager is immature. It is disturbing because every adult institution around him proves that his distrust was reasonable. Our next victim also retreats from other people. But where Steve performs confidence, Donna Beneviento, pronounced Beneviento, hides so completely that she needs a doll to speak for her. Donna Beneviento. Donna Beneviento is easy to reduce to the creepy doll lady, which feels slightly unfair when Resident Evil Village also contains a 9-foot vampire and a man who appears to have built an entire factory because therapy was unavailable. Donna is different from the other village lords, because almost everything frightening about her is a defense mechanism that somebody else weaponized. The gardener's diary says she had feared other people since childhood because of the scar across her face. After her parents died, she isolated herself and spoke only through Angie, a doll her father had made for her. The game never states that her parents killed themselves, and it never gives a neat diagnosis for Donna's condition. What it gives us is more grounded and sadder. Visible scarring, severe social fear, parental loss, isolation, and a handmade object that becomes her safest way to communicate. Then Mother Miranda enters her life. Miranda presents herself as a maternal figure and calls Donna an adopted daughter. But Miranda's medical report describes Donna as a subject. Her Ka-DOH affinity is favorable. Her brain function is normal, although the report labels her as severely mentally ill. She can secrete a signaling substance that controls plants infected by the mutamycete. Pollen from certain flowers allows her to produce hallucinations in people who inhale it. She divides that parasite among her dolls so she can control them remotely. And after listing the mechanics of Donna's body, Miranda ends with the only judgment she truly cares about: unfit vessel for Eva. So Donna's new mother is not rescuing her from loneliness. Miranda is testing whether Donna's body can house the consciousness of her dead child. The gardener sees Donna becoming more animated and is grateful to Miranda. Then Donna gives him yellow flowers. Their pollen makes him hallucinate his dead wife. Donna is thrilled and invites him to the house, saying he can see his family again. The diary stops there. That does not prove exactly what Donna intended or exactly how he died. It does show the pattern. Donna's power offers people the thing she wants most: the return of someone they lost. It is a beautiful promise delivered through neurological manipulation. When Ethan reaches House Beneviento, Donna uses Mia's image, Rose's voice, a wooden doll, and the unforgettable giant infant hallucination to turn his private fears into architecture. She does not just attack him, she makes him walk through the possibility that his marriage was built on secrets and that he failed as a father. But Donna is not a harmless victim. Her grief has made her dangerous. Her final confrontation proves she is willing to trap and kill Ethan rather than let him leave. The accurate line is not that she begs him to stay. She tells him she cannot let him leave. That distinction matters. Donna is sympathetic, but sympathy is not innocence. Her backstory is disturbing because Miranda found a lonely, psychologically vulnerable woman whose only stable relationship was with a doll, then gave that doll power and called the experiment a family. And somehow, the next family manages to be even less healthy: Alfred and Alexia Ashford. Alfred and Alexia Ashford are often called clones of their ancestor Veronica. That is close enough for casual conversation and not quite what the game says. Their father, Alexander Ashford, believed he had identified a genetic basis for human intelligence. He took genetic material from the preserved remains of the Ashford family's legendary ancestor Veronica, manipulated it, and implanted it into an unfertilized egg carried by a surrogate mother. The result was twins. Alfred was highly intelligent. Alexia was a genius. Alexander did not greet that outcome as the birth of two children. His report evaluates them like results. Alfred's intelligence is not high enough for the purpose. Alexia is exactly what he wanted: a revival of Veronica who can restore the family's glory. Imagine discovering that your father's private notes do not describe your first words, your personality, or the day he held you. They score how successfully you recreated a dead woman. The twins eventually find the report. Alfred's diary says the truth makes him hate Alexander. But rather than rejecting the family's obsession, he and Alexia absorb it completely. They decide their father is the failure. Then they use him as a human test subject. Alexia has developed T. Veronica by combining the progenitor virus with genetic material associated with a queen ant. Her notes explain why ants appeal to her. One queen rules while soldiers and workers are replaceable. She sees herself as the queen and everyone else as an ignorant mass born to serve. Alexander's infection fails, his mind and body collapse, and he becomes the creature called Nosferatu. The twins bind him and lock him beneath the Antarctic facility. Alexia then decides to infect herself. To avoid the rapid failure that destroyed her father, she lowers her body temperature and enters suspended animation for 15 years, allowing the virus to change her slowly. That leaves Alfred alone. He becomes master of Rockford Island and maintains the fiction that Alexia is awake and living with him. He dresses as her, speaks as her, and holds conversations between the two personalities. The game plays this as a shocking reveal, and some of its presentation has aged about as gracefully as milk on a radiator. But the actual horror is not that Alfred wears a dress. It is that his entire identity has collapsed around the sister his father taught him was a successful child. He worships Alexia because he was engineered, evaluated, and found lesser before he was old enough to understand the test. Alexia awakens exactly when planned. Alfred dies believing her return validates his life. She barely mourns him. To her, Alfred has always been what her aunt metaphor says he is, a loyal soldier whose purpose ends when the queen no longer needs him. There is no innocent person at the center of this family by the time we meet them. The twins torture their father, run an island prison, and kill freely. But their cruelty grew inside a family that treated birth as research, intelligence as worth, and love as loyalty to a bloodline. Alexander wanted to manufacture a perfect heir. He succeeded in manufacturing two people incapable of seeing anyone, including each other, as fully human. The next father also tells himself that every atrocity is an act of love. The difference is that Javier Hidalgo sacrifices other people's daughters to keep his own alive. Manuela Hidalgo. Manuela Hidalgo is the daughter of Javier Hidalgo, a drug lord who controls a region of South America through violence, assassination, and the Sacred Snakes crime syndicate. Capcom's official summary describes the contradiction directly. Javier is brutal to everyone around him and fiercely devoted to Manuela. That devotion becomes catastrophic when she develops the same rare disease that affected her mother. Javier had already tried viral treatment once. When his wife, Hilda, became ill, he used the T-virus in an attempt to save her. The result was a monster. When Manuela becomes sick years later, Javier obtains the T. Veronica virus and tries again. The virus keeps her alive, but control requires regular organ transplants, so girls begin disappearing from nearby communities. Javier's organization kidnaps them, harvests their organs, and uses those organs to stabilize Manuela. In the Dark Side Chronicles, Leon Kennedy and Jack Krauser enter a warehouse and find the evidence. Javier states the process plainly. Manuela's organs must be replaced regularly to reduce the pain and keep the virus at bay. Manuela did not choose this. When she learns the truth, she runs away. She tells Javier that if he had allowed her to die, none of it would have happened. That is one of the most brutal positions any Resident Evil character is forced into. Her father has made her continued heartbeat feel like participation in mass murder. The kidnapped girls are the primary victims. They lose their lives, their bodies, and in most cases even their names. Manuela is also a victim, because Javier turns her survival into a moral debt she can never repay. There is something uniquely possessive about his love. Javier does not save the person Manuela is. He preserves her body against her wishes because he cannot tolerate losing his daughter. The distinction between loving somebody and refusing to release them is basically the entire horror story. During the final battle, Manuela sides with Leon and Krauser. T. Veronica gives her blood unusual, violently reactive properties, and she uses that power against Javier. In the better outcome, she survives and is taken into United States custody. Leon tells her she has an obligation to live for the girls living inside her. It is meant as reassurance, and it also reveals why her ending is not clean. Her body is physically composed, in part, of organs stolen from murdered girls. Every future day carries proof of Javier's crimes. Operation Javier also destroys Krauser's faith in ordinary human strength. He sees Manuela's power, injures his arm, and becomes obsessed with the idea that viruses can transcend physical limits. That path eventually leads him to Wesker and Sadler. So Javier's attempt to save one daughter produces a chain of victims. The girls he abducts, the wife he mutates, the daughter he infects, the communities he terrorizes, and the soldier who walks away believing monsters are stronger than men. It is an extremely Resident Evil version of parental love. One man insists he is protecting his family, and somehow a warehouse fills with organs. Our next story replaces parental obsession with romantic obsession, and it may be the most complete destruction of identity in the series. Carla Radames. Before Carla Radames looked like Ada Wong, she was one of the most gifted scientists in the Resident Evil universe. The in-game Carla file says she completed a doctorate in genetics at 15. Derek Simmons recruited her to develop viruses and biological weapons. He praised her intelligence, and because Carla was deeply devoted to him, she kept trying to earn more of that praise. Her greatest achievement was the C virus. Then Simmons used it to erase her. Simmons had worked with the real Ada Wong around the time of the Raccoon City incident. Ada left after learning about his role in the city's destruction. Simmons could not accept that she was gone, so he decided that if Ada would not return, he would make another Ada who could not leave. Countless women were used in failed experiments. The C virus could transform the body, but Simmons needed a genetically compatible subject. His organization eventually discovered that Carla herself was suitable. He tricked her into participating because she believed he valued her too much to risk her life. That belief is the knife in the story. Carla had confused being useful with being loved. Simmons encouraged that confusion until the moment it made her easy to sacrifice. The experiment changes her face and body to resemble Ada. Much of Carla's original personality is damaged or suppressed. Simmons trains her, addresses her, and treats her as the woman he wants. He is so consumed by his obsession that he ignores the remaining evidence that Carla is still inside. Eventually, that buried part returns. Carla realizes what he did and dedicates herself to destroying him. She forms Neo Umbrella, spreads the C virus, manipulates global conflicts, and ensures Simmons is injected with an enhanced strain that forces him through repeated, painful mutations. None of that makes Carla a secret hero. She becomes responsible for mass death on a scale far beyond the crime committed against her. Understanding the origin of her rage does not excuse where she points it, but her beginning remains horrifying. Simmons takes a prodigy who built the tool he needs, uses her admiration to place her in the experiment, and replaces her appearance with the face of a woman who rejected him. Carla is not transformed because she failed. She is transformed because she succeeded so completely that her abuser no longer needs the person who did the work, and even her revenge cannot escape the imposed identity. When Carla mutates across the aircraft carrier, her body produces copies resembling Ada. The face Simmons forced onto her survives deeper than her own sense of self. There are many Resident Evil infections that destroy a body. Carla's destroys authorship. Her intelligence creates the virus. Simmons uses the virus to rewrite her, and the rewritten version uses that same virus to punish the world. By the end, it is difficult to tell where Carla's choices begin and Simmons' damage ends. The next villain wants to go even further. Alex Wesker does not plan to make a child resemble her. She plans to move into the child's mind and keep living there. Natalia Corda. Natalia Corda is a survivor of the Terra Grigia Panic, the bioterrorist attack that destroyed the artificial island city in 2004. She is a little girl when she watches her parents die. That trauma changes her so deeply that Neil Fisher's report describes her as incapable of feeling fear. It is not presented as a healthy superpower. The report's logic is colder, and after seeing everyone she knew killed, what could possibly be left to frighten her? To Alex Wesker, the answer makes Natalia perfect. Alex has continued Oswell Spencer's research into immortality. She does not believe the body can live forever, so she develops a procedure designed to transfer a mind into another person. Her notes identify two requirements. The new vessel must be mentally strong and able to overcome fear. Then the transferred consciousness needs 6 months to stabilize. Natalia is selected because trauma has already done the screening. This is one of Resident Evil's most consistent forms of cruelty. A child survives something impossible, and the adults around her interpret survival as compatibility with the next experiment. Alex kidnaps members of TerraSave and brings them to the island of Sabotage. Bracelets monitor their fear. The T-Phobos virus is designed to activate when fear becomes intense. Most of the captives are being tested, punished, or used as data. Natalia is being prepared as a body Alex can occupy. The transfer occurs and Alex kills herself, believing her consciousness will awaken inside Natalia after the stabilization period. Then Alex sees Natalia again and becomes afraid. That fear activates the virus inside Alex's own body, mutating her and leaving a grotesque version of the woman who thought she had defeated death. She spends the next 6 months trying to kill Natalia because the child's continued existence threatens the replacement identity taking root inside her. Barry Burton eventually rescues Natalia. In the better ending, they defeat Alex, and Natalia becomes part of the Burton family. But the final scene quietly refuses to call this a complete rescue. Natalia sits reading a passage by Franz Kafka and speaks with Alex's mannerisms, implying that at least part of the transfer succeeded. Barry saves the child's body. Nobody can guarantee who will eventually live inside it. Natalia's backstory is disturbing because Alex does not need her dead. Death would ruin the vessel. She needs Natalia alive, stable, and emptied of ownership. Even the quality that saves Natalia from the fear virus is the product of having watched her family die. Her numbness protects her and marks her for exploitation at exactly the same time. Resident Evil Requiem takes this idea of children as vessels and industrializes it. It does not select one traumatized child. It manufactures entire groups of them. Chloe and the children of Requiem Resident Evil has visited the Raccoon City orphanage before. In the remake of Resident Evil 2, a letter reveals that the facility supplied children as candidates for Umbrella experiments. When one former subject escaped a clinical trial and returned seeking help, the director disposed of every child in the candidate pool as a precaution, then told the neighbors they had simply been moved. That was already one of the darkest files in the series. Requiem somehow finds a basement under it. Long before the 1998 outbreak, Oswell Spencer was pursuing memory transfer as a route to immortality. The ARC facility beneath Raccoon City worked with children who were genetically engineered for that research. They were not treated as patients. They were produced in series. The Series 60 children receive recombinant DNA, Spencer's plasma, and experimental procedures intended to move his memories into another body. An in-game report says, the transfer fails and the children develop mental abnormalities. It then announces another medical procedure and a final phase with the tone of somebody rescheduling a dentist appointment. A researcher's notebook describes the children as having surgical scars across their heads. The writer initially claims to be disturbed, then becomes excited by the chance to experiment on them. That emotional turn is almost more disgusting than any monster. Umbrella does not only employ people with no conscience, it rewards people for treating revulsion like a temporary onboarding issue. In 1990, the Series 60 children turn on the staff. During a playable memory, a girl named Chloe moves through the orphanage as the other children hunt the researchers. She reaches an underground chapel where failed subjects have been placed in coffins. One toe tag belongs to Charlotte, 7 years old, discarded for volatile symptoms. Chloe eventually enters ARC and discovers the truth. She is not an orphan who happened to arrive there. She is a Series 70 subject, genetically engineered and raised inside the experiment. A file notes that adjusting the virus level in Chloe produced signs of stability, which makes her the promising result. Then researchers detect symptoms. She is judged a failure too. Her last experience is not simply dying. It is realizing that her childhood, friendships, home, and even body were components of someone else's attempt to outlive death. Decades later, Grace Ashcroft is shown evidence of Chloe and the later children. Grace has been manipulated into believing these girls are copies of her, and that their deaths somehow originate with her existence. The eventual truth is that Grace herself was naturally born and later entrusted to Alyssa Ashcroft. But the psychological weapon works because the children resemble her. Emily, the blind girl Grace tries to rescue at Rhodes Hill, is part of this legacy. She is wounded, mutates, and is shot by Leon. In Requiem's hopeful ending, Elpis is revealed as an antiviral. Leon explains that he avoided her vital organs, and the epilogue indicates Emily survives and is taken in by Grace. That is unusually merciful for Resident Evil. But Emily's rescue does not undo the children in the coffins. It does not give Chloe a family outside the facility. And it does not change the central obscenity of the project. Spencer was so terrified of his own death that he created childhoods designed to be overwritten by him. The series often gives its villains grand language about evolution and immortality. Requiem shows what those words look like at ground level. They look like a 7-year-old's toe tag. And now we reach the family that viewers of the original video overwhelmingly singled out as the most tragic, the Bakers. Because unlike Umbrella's researchers, Jack and Marguerite do not walk into a laboratory and volunteer to become monsters. They open their home to a child in a storm. The Baker family before Resident Evil 7, the Baker estate is not a murder house. It is just a home in Dolby, Louisiana. Jack Baker is a former Marine. Marguerite is his wife. Their daughter Zoe is practical and protective. Their son Lucas is brilliant, unstable, and already dangerous. The downloadable chapter Daughters makes the family tragedy clear by showing the night everything changes. A tanker has gone down during a hurricane. Jack finds a little girl, Eveline, and an unconscious woman, Mia Winters, near the wreck. He brings them home because leaving injured people in a storm would be inhuman. It is probably the kindest decision Jack makes in the entire series. It destroys his family. Eveline is an engineered biological weapon who spreads mutamacete mold. She wants a family and can infect people into accepting the roles she assigns them. Within hours, Marguerite is behaving strangely. Jack becomes violent. Zoe watches her parents lose control while still looking exactly like themselves. That last part matters. In many Resident Evil outbreaks, the body transforms quickly enough that the monster feels separate from the person. The Baker infection begins as domestic abuse with a biological cause. Jack can speak. Marguerite can call herself Zoe's mother. They can use familiar voices while the mold pushes their minds toward Eveline. Zoe resists complete control and spends years trapped on the property, searching for a cure. Jack and Marguerite abduct or kill people who come near the estate. Eveline turns victims into molded. The house fills with evidence of lives ending behind closed doors. But the Bakers are not equally innocent. Lucas was dangerous before the infection. A childhood note reveals that he trapped another boy named Oliver in the attic and left him to die. Later, the criminal organization called The Connections gives Lucas a serum that frees him from Eveline's control while preserving his regenerative infection. He pretends to remain under her influence, conducts his own experiments, builds traps, and reports data back to the organization. So when Lucas tortures people, that is Lucas. Jack and Marguerite are more complicated. The mold reaches the brain, produces hallucinations, aligns the subject's thoughts with Eveline, and can eventually place them under her control. That does not mean every action is performed by a fully conscious prisoner watching helplessly for 3 straight years. The infection changes cognition and identity. Their original personalities surface in fragments. The clearest example comes when Ethan Winters briefly encounters the real Jack within the mold's shared consciousness. Jack appears calm and ashamed. He explains that Eveline did this to the family and begs Ethan to free them. That scene recontextualizes every ridiculous dinner table threat and wall-smashing pursuit. Somewhere inside the man chasing Ethan is the father who carried a stranded child out of a hurricane. Marguerite leaves a doctor's letter in her room. The doctor has seen fungus-like structures in scans of her skull and warns that the hallucinations and sounds she hears may be connected. He urges her to come in before it is too late. She never gets help. The estate's isolation makes the infection self-sealing. The family appears hostile, visitors disappear, and anybody who enters becomes another body the mold can use. From the outside, they look like the danger. From the inside, there is nobody left who can reliably ask for rescue. Zoe's fate makes this even crueler. She survives for years without becoming Eveline's obedient daughter. She creates a serum and guides Ethan through the property. In the canonical choice, Ethan uses the available dose on Mia, leaving Zoe behind. End of Zoe later allows Jack's brother Joe to rescue her, but for a long stretch of the story, doing the most to fight the infection earns Zoe the least immediate escape. The Bakers are terrifying because they violate the safest idea most people have, that home and family are separate from the horror outside. In Dulve, opening the door to help someone brings the horror in. Then it uses the people who love you as masks, and the man who enters that house looking for his wife has an even stranger fate. Ethan Winters dies near the beginning of Resident Evil 7. He just does not learn that until the next game. Ethan Winters receives a message from Mia 3 years after she disappeared. The message tells him to come to Dulve. This is objectively a terrible idea. If your missing spouse sends a cryptic video from an abandoned Louisiana property, there are several reasonable responses before driving there alone. Call the police. Tell a friend. Bring shoes appropriate for a swamp. Ethan chooses none of these because Love has apparently deleted the part of his brain that recognizes horror game geography. He enters the Baker guest house, finds Mia, and learns almost immediately that she is infected. She attacks him, cuts off his hand, and is eventually subdued. Then Jack Baker catches Ethan and crushes his head with a stomp. That is the moment Ethan dies. The mold infecting the estate reconstructs him as a molded organism with his memories and personality intact. Resident Evil 7 never explains this directly. It simply shows Ethan surviving injuries that should be impossible, reattaching his hand, and pouring medicine onto open wounds like first aid spray has quietly become industrial adhesive. Village finally tells him the truth. Evelyn appears inside his mind and reminds him of Jack's attack. Ethan has not been an ordinary living human since the opening hours of the previous game. The revelation does not mean he is a fake person. This is where wording matters. Ethan retains his memories, relationships, choices, and sense of self. He loves Mia and Rose. He feels pain. He is a conscious continuation of Ethan, even if the body carrying that consciousness is mold reproducing a human form. But Mia knew there was something abnormal about him and kept the full truth hidden. After Dulvey, they build a life under government protection and have a daughter, Rosemary. Then Mother Miranda kidnaps Mia, imitates her, lives inside their home, and studies Rose. Chris Redfield attacks the house to kill Miranda, but does not explain the plan to Ethan, because Resident Evil Village requires at least one elite operative to forget how sentences work. Ethan wakes in Eastern Europe, finds his daughter missing, and spends the game allowing increasingly large portions of his body to become optional. His fingers are bitten off, his hand is severed and reattached. Lady Dimitrescu hangs him through both palms. Moreau covers him in acid. Heisenberg tries to turn him into a weapon. Miranda tears out his heart. The body keeps going because the mold regenerates it, but by the end, that regeneration is failing. Ethan learns Rose has been separated into crystallized flasks and used in a ceremony intended to turn her into a vessel for Miranda's dead daughter. He assembles her, defeats Miranda, and realizes his own body is breaking apart. Then he takes the detonator, sends Rose away with Chris, and destroys the Megamycete with himself still beside it. The disturbing part is not simply that Ethan was dead all along, it is that he spends 2 games being evaluated through his usefulness. The connections created Eveline. Eveline's mold remade Ethan. Miranda sees Ethan as an interesting specimen and Rose as a vessel. Heisenberg sees both father and daughter as weapons against Miranda. Even Chris, while trying to protect them, moves the family like pieces in an operation. Ethan's final decision is the first time the destruction of his body is entirely his own choice, and Shadows of Rose confirms that his consciousness remains within the Megamycete network, still trying to protect his daughter years later. For a protagonist famous for having almost no visible face, Ethan is one of the series' clearest statements about personhood. His biology becomes fungus, his body is replaceable, his decisions remain his. The creature responsible for that second life is often described as an evil child. Before we get to her, there is one more Winters whose entire childhood is shaped by decisions made before she could speak, Rosemary Winters. Rosemary Winters enters the world as the child of a mold-reconstructed father and a mother who had once been infected and controlled by Eveline. That is not the sort of medical history that gets you a sticker after the appointment. Rose has an extraordinary connection to the Mutamycete from birth. Miranda believes she is the perfect vessel for Eva, the daughter she lost to the Spanish flu. So Miranda replaces Mia, infiltrates the Winters home, kidnaps Rose, and tests the baby's regenerative abilities by separating her body into 4 crystallized flasks. One is explicitly labeled as Rose's head. Village insists she can be restored, and she is, but it is worth pausing on how disturbing that is. Rose is an infant. She's killed or disassembled so completely that her father carries labeled body parts between the village lords, while everyone around him talks about her power like the baby is a rare battery. Miranda wants her as a vessel. Heisenberg wants to use her against Miranda. The 4 lords hold pieces of her because the ceremony requires them. Nobody in that system is interested in what Rose might eventually want. Ethan rescues her and sacrifices himself. Mia survives, but by the time Rose is 16, she has spent much of her life under government protection and apart from an ordinary family. She sees Mia and Chris only intermittently. Other children bully her because her body produces strange, mold-like effects, and adults need reassurance that she is not dangerous. Rose begins to hate the power that saved her life. That is the central tragedy of Shadows of Rose. Ethan sees her abilities as part of the daughter worth dying for. Miranda sees them as access to resurrection. The government sees them as something to monitor. Rose experiences them as the reason nobody treats her normally. When she learns that a fragment of the Megamycete may contain a purifying crystal capable of removing her powers, she enters its stored realm of consciousness. Immediately, she encounters copies of herself being hunted and consumed. A warped version of the Duke turns their deaths into entertainment. Creatures attack by draining faces because, apparently, Lisa Trevor did not use up the franchise's annual budget for facial trauma. A mysterious guide communicates through glowing words and calls himself Michael. He warns Rose, gives her supplies, and pushes her to survive. Rose eventually enters a recreation of House Beneviento where her memories of bullying become puzzles and threats. Evelyn appears, jealous that Rose possesses the power and parental love she was denied. Then Rose finds the crystal and gives up her abilities. That is exactly what Miranda wanted. The invitation into the Megamycete was a trap. Miranda's preserved consciousness still wants Rose as Eva's vessel, and a powerless Rose is easier to take. Michael finally manifests as Ethan, whose consciousness has remained inside the mold network. Even after his body is destroyed, he is still trying to keep the promise he made to his daughter. Rose has to make a choice that reverses the emotional logic of her whole life. She can keep rejecting the part of herself everyone called monstrous, or accept it and use it on her own terms. She breaks the purifying crystal, regains her power, defeats Miranda, and embraces Ethan before returning to the real world. This is more than a superhero origin. Rose's entire backstory is a fight over who gets to define her body. Miranda says it is a container for Ava. The government treats it as a biological concern. Her classmates call it freakish. Even Rose initially believes normality requires cutting away the thing that makes her different. The ending does not make her loneliness disappear. She still visits the grave of a father she barely knew in ordinary life. She still reacts violently when an agent mockingly calls her Eveline, because the comparison carries years of being treated like a weapon waiting to happen. But Rose understands that inherited biology is not inherited purpose. She is not Eveline's replacement. She is not Eva's vessel. She is not a continuation of Miranda, and she is not merely the result of Ethan's infection. Rose gets something most experimental subjects in Resident Evil never receive. She gets enough power to refuse the role written for her. The child whose mold made Rose possible never gets that clean distinction between power and purpose. That is true in the same way that describing a guided missile as badly behaved is true. Eveline is dangerous. She is also a product designed to need something her creators never planned to give her. Eveline, pronounced Evuhlin, is not born into a family. She is manufactured as E001. The connections develop her from mutamycete material originally obtained through Miranda's research. The goal is a biological weapon that can infiltrate a target population without looking like a weapon. Eveline resembles a child. She spreads mold, links infected minds, induces hallucinations, and controls people from within. That is strategically useful because nobody expects the little girl in the room to be the delivery system. Her creators also engineer her with a powerful desire for family. That is not a sentimental accident. Family gives her a structure for control. If infected people become mother, father, brother, or sister, Eveline can organize obedience through emotional roles humans already understand. Mia Winters works as her handler and poses as her mother during transport. Eveline calls her mommy, but the relationship is an assignment. Mia is moving a weapon aboard a tanker, not adopting a child. When the mission collapses, Eveline takes the family instruction literally and violently. She infects the ship, causes the wreck, and reaches the Baker property. Then she builds the family she was designed to want. Jack becomes the father, Marguerite becomes the mother, Lucas and Zoe become siblings. Mia is pulled back into the role she performed. Anyone who resists is pressured, infected, or replaced. Eveline's demand sounds childish. Love me, stay with me, be my family. The stakes are not childish. Her version of love removes consent. She also ages at an extreme rate because the stabilizing treatment is no longer being administered. The old woman Ethan sees around the estate is Eveline herself, not a random grandmother. Her child form is a projection. In only a few years, the body designed to look harmless deteriorates into old age. Lucas's observation logs track that decline with grotesque casualness. Her health worsens. Her mold output changes. People around her are converted into creatures. The language remains clinical because, to the connections and Lucas, Eveline is still primarily data. Her final confrontation with Ethan begins when he injects her with a necrotoxin. For a moment, the old woman and the child overlap. Eveline asks why everyone hates her. The honest answer is that she has terrorized, infected, and killed people. The equally honest answer is that the first adults in her life designed her capacity for attachment as a control system, simulated motherhood to transport her, denied her a real childhood, and then lost control of the need they built. Eveline is not innocent in the simple sense. She understands enough to manipulate people and punishes resistance, but she never had a version of love that did not come with ownership. That is why I find her more disturbing than most tyrants. A tyrant is engineered muscle pointed at a target. Eveline is engineered loneliness. Her creators take a child's basic dependence on caregivers, turn it into a weapon, and then act surprised when the weapon refuses abandonment. And when Ethan destroys her, the consequences continue through the Bakers, Mia, Ethan, Rose, and eventually the Megamycete itself. Eveline wanted a family so badly that she infected one into existence. The next child already had parents. Unfortunately, they were William and Annette Birkin. Sherry Birkin. Sherry Birkin is 12 during the Raccoon City incident. Both of her parents are senior Umbrella scientists. William creates the G-Virus. Annette helps protect the research. Their work matters so much to them that Sherry learns to expect absence as normal family life. When the outbreak begins, Annette contacts Sherry at school and tells her to leave, retrieve a pendant from home, and go to the police station. Hidden inside that pendant is a G-Virus sample, so even the object Sherry carries for comfort has been converted into research storage. She reaches the station alone. In the remake, Police Chief Brian Irons abducts her and holds her at the orphanage. This is not a random safe building. Files reveal. The orphanage has been supplying Umbrella with children for experiments. Sherry is hiding inside an institution built to turn vulnerable children into inventory. Claire Redfield finds and protects her. William Birkin also finds her. After injecting himself with G, William mutates and becomes driven to reproduce by implanting embryos in compatible hosts. Genetic relatives are especially suitable. That makes his own daughter a target. He infects Sherry. There is a particularly awful symbolism to the scene. William has already prioritized G over his family while human. After mutation, the virus reduces the biological relationship between father and daughter to compatibility. He does not recognize Sherry as someone to protect. Her genetics make her useful for propagation. Claire obtains the antiviral agent and saves her before the embryo can fully develop. Sherry escapes the city with Claire and Leon, but this is not the end of her captivity. Government agents take her into custody because her body contains the G-Virus antibody. Capcom's official Sherry file says she is essentially held captive under government supervision and cannot live a normal life. Leon's service is used to help secure her safety. Years later, Sherry becomes a government agent herself as a condition of release. Read that sequence again. Her parents turn her life into proximity to research. Her father infects her. The government studies the aftermath. Then the route out of custody is to work for the same state that held her. Sherry remains remarkably compassionate. In Resident Evil 6, she protects Jake Muller and believes people can choose something better than their parents. That optimism is not naivety. It is rebellion against a childhood in which every powerful adult insisted biology determines value. Her assignment in Resident Evil 6 is almost a summary of her entire life. Derek Simmons sends her to locate Jake because Jake's blood contains antibodies to the C-Virus. A government official dispatches one survivor valued for unusual blood to collect another survivor valued for unusual blood. Everyone uses the language of saving the world, and that part is real. But the people at the center are still being discussed like walking vaccine factories. Then Neo Umbrella captures Sherry and Jake and holds them for 6 months of testing. Sherry has already spent years under examination after Raccoon City. She escapes government custody by joining the government only to be placed in another facility because a different organization wants the same thing, access to what her body can do. The personal betrayal is worse when she learns Simmons is behind the new crisis. This is the man associated with her government protection, the authority structure that defined her life after Raccoon City, and the superior giving her orders. He is also the man whose obsession destroyed Carla Radames, and whose conspiracy helps unleash the C-Virus. Sherry does not respond by accepting that every institution is corrupt and nothing matters. She protects Jake anyway. When Jake learns he is Albert Wesker's son, Sherry understands immediately that a parent's crimes do not make the child guilty. She has been living inside that argument since she was 12. Jake's blood helps create a vaccine. Sherry's regeneration helps them survive. But the meaningful part is that neither character allows valuable biology to become a complete identity. That is the victory Sherry's parents never give her. William sees genetics. Annette sees research. The government sees antibodies. Sherry keeps seeing people. Her residual G infection gives her regenerative abilities and slowed aging. Those powers help her survive, but they also ensure institutions will always see something valuable in her blood. Requiem extends the cost. Sherry and Leon, the two survivors once taken by the government, continue working together decades later. They are linked not only by what happened in Raccoon City, but by the fact that surviving made both of them useful to the people who collected them afterward. That is Sherry's real horror story. She survives the father who tries to reproduce through her body, then grows up under authorities who treat the surviving infection as national property. She becomes an agent and chooses to use that position to save people, which is admirable. It does not make the original bargain voluntary, but no Resident Evil character better represents a human being becoming long-term research material than the final person on this list. Sherry loses her childhood to G. Lisa Trevor loses more than 30 years to the origins of Umbrella itself. Lisa Trevor. Lisa Trevor is 14 years old in 1967. Her father, George Trevor, is a famous architect hired by Oswell Spencer to design a mansion in the Arklay Mountains. George fills the estate with hidden passages, traps, false walls, and elaborate mechanisms. When construction is complete, Spencer invites the Trevor family to visit. George believes he's seeing the finished work. Spencer is removing the only other person who understands its secrets. Jessica and Lisa arrive first. Umbrella seizes them and administers different strains of the progenitor virus. Jessica's body fails to bond with it. A clinical note marks the result as negative and the action as disposed. Lisa's result is positive, but delayed. So she is kept. George arrives, is drugged, and wakes as a prisoner inside the mansion he designed. His diary documents an escape attempt that becomes steadily more desperate. He searches the halls, remembers the mechanisms, finds Jessica's shoe, and eventually reaches a dead end where a grave has already been prepared with his name. He understands that Spencer planned his death before he arrived. The diary ends with George apologizing to Jessica and Lisa because he believes his pride in the mansion brought them into the conspiracy. He dies without learning what happened to his daughter. Lisa remains in the laboratory. For years, Umbrella administers viruses and parasites. Studying her abnormal ability to survive and absorb them, her body changes. Her mind deteriorates. She becomes violent, but she continues searching for her mother. At one point, a woman she believes is Jessica appears. Lisa realizes the face is wrong, so she tears it off. She begins wearing the faces of women over her own, trying to restore the mother she can no longer fully remember. That image is one of the most disturbing in Resident Evil, and not because it is visually grotesque. It is a corrupted version of recognition. The experiments have damaged Lisa so profoundly that she understands her mother as a face that can be removed from the wrong person and carried until it becomes right. In 1988, William Birkin and Albert Wesker implant the Nemesis Alpha parasite into Lisa as part of their research. Her body absorbs it instead of being controlled by it. Researchers recover a new viral element from the result, which contributes to Birkin's development of the G-Virus. That means Lisa's suffering is not an isolated chapter from Umbrella's early history, it is foundational. The work performed on her feeds later bioweapons. G leads to William's mutation, Sherry's infection, government interest in her body, and research that continues for decades. Lisa is one of the hidden human costs underneath the entire series. Umbrella eventually decides she is no longer useful and attempts to execute her. She survives. They dispose of her beneath the estate. She survives that too. Umbrella actively experiments on Lisa for 28 years before deciding she is no longer useful. By the time Estieris reaches the mansion in 1998, she has been trapped in some form for more than 30 years. More than 30 years. Longer than Leon has been alive during Raccoon City. Longer than Steve gets to live at all. More than 3 decades of infections, confinement, failed disposal, and the fading memory of a mother who died at the beginning. In the remake, Lisa eventually encounters Jessica's coffin. Depending on the sequence, she recognizes the skull as her mother's and jumps into the darkness with it. There is no triumphant cure. Nobody restores the 14-year-old girl. The closest thing to peace is Lisa finally finding part of Jessica and disappearing beside it. That is why Lisa Trevor remains the most disturbing backstory in Resident Evil. Not because she is the strongest monster, not because she has the largest body count, and not because her design is scary, although a person wearing several faces is, to be clear, not ideal hallway company. Lisa is the point where the series' entire philosophy becomes visible. Spencer wants progress without limits. Umbrella wants data without responsibility. Researchers see that Lisa survives and interpret endurance as permission to continue. Every time her body refuses to die, the reward is another experiment. Survival is the thing that condemns her. And that pattern connects almost everyone we covered. Leon survives Raccoon City, so the government recruits him under threat. Jill survives infection, so Wesker uses her antibodies. Manuela survives T. Veronica, so other girls die to maintain her body. Natalia survives Terra Grigia, so Alex chooses her as a vessel. Sherry survives G, so the government keeps her under observation. Lisa survives Progenitor, so Umbrella spends decades testing how much more she can endure. Resident Evil looks like a series about avoiding death. Its darkest stories are about what happens when powerful people decide your survival belongs to them. That is the real monster behind almost every virus in the franchise. Not the organism, the person who sees a living human being and thinks, we can still get more data. And honestly, after all that, the zombies feel almost polite. They only want to eat you once.